Sweat trickled down my back as I walked out of the house, the sun dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows across the yard. It had been an amazing summer party. My friends and I had danced, laughed, and talked until our throats were raw. As the sky darkened, we decided it was time to head home. The air was thick with humidity, and the cicadas buzzed a relentless chorus. "Let's take the shortcut through the woods," Mia suggested. It wasn't the first time we'd done it. In fact, it was almost a tradition. The path was barely visible in the dark, but we knew it by heart. It cut our journey in half, and besides, walking along the empty roads at night felt eerie. We were about halfway through the woods when I started feeling uneasy. I brushed it off as just being paranoid from the night's excitement. The trees closed in around us, the only light coming from the full moon, casting an ethereal glow on the forest floor. "Hey, did you hear that?" Kyle whispered, stopping abruptly. We all froze, straining our ears. The usual sounds of the forest, the rustling leaves, distant hoots of an owl, felt louder in the silence that followed his question. Then we heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible shuffle, like something moving just out of sight. "Probably just an animal," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But my heart was racing. We started walking again, a little faster this time, casting glances over our shoulders. Mia clutched my arm. "What if it's someone following us?" "Don't be ridiculous," Kyle said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Let's just get out of here." We quickened our pace, the path becoming less familiar as the shadows deepened. That's when we saw it. A figure standing motionless in the middle of the path ahead. "What the hell?" I breathed. It was a man, tall and gaunt, his clothes hanging off him like rags. His eyes glinted in the moonlight, empty and cold. He didn't move as we approached, and the air around him seemed to grow colder, the sounds of the forest dimming. "Let's just go around him," Kyle muttered, trying to sound brave. We stepped off the path, moving carefully through the underbrush, but the man's eyes followed us, his head turning ever so slightly. We were almost past him when Mia tripped, her gasp breaking the eerie silence. The man moved then, his head jerking toward us, and he started to walk, no, glide, toward us. "Run!" I shouted, and we bolted, the woods a blur around us. I could hear Mia's labored breathing, Kyle's footfalls behind me. But the man's movements were silent, his presence a creeping dread. Branches whipped at my face, roots tried to trip me, but adrenaline pushed me forward. I glanced back once and saw the man was closer, his eyes locked on mine. Panic surged through me. We needed to get out of these woods. "Over here!" Kyle yelled, veering off to the left. We followed him, bursting out of the tree line into a clearing. We didn't stop running until we reached the road, collapsing in a heap, gasping for breath. "What was that?" Mia cried, tears streaming down her face. None of us had an answer. We just sat there, huddled together, staring back at the woods, expecting to see the man emerge. But he never did. When we finally got home, the terror still clung to us. I couldn't sleep, every creak of the house making me jump. The image of the man's cold eyes haunted me. The next day, we all avoided talking about it, as if speaking of it would make it real again. Weeks passed, and summer turned to fall. We tried to move on, but the memory of that night never faded. One evening, as I was getting ready for bed, I noticed something outside my window. A figure standing at the edge of the yard, just beyond the reach of the streetlights. It was him, the man from the woods, his eyes glinting in the dark. My blood turned to ice. He raised a hand, and I could swear he smiled, a grotesque twist of his lips. Then he turned and disappeared into the shadows. To this day, I don't know who or what he was, but I know this: something is out there in those woods, and it's watching, waiting, and it's never going to let us forget. The ball soared across the playground, and I sprinted to catch it, my heart pounding with the familiar thrill of the game. Every afternoon, I'd come here after work to shoot hoops, a small solace in my otherwise monotonous routine. The sun was setting, casting long shadows that danced across the cracked asphalt. I noticed him a few weeks ago, an older man, maybe in his late 50s, with a kind face and a disarming smile. He watched from a distance at first, just a friendly observer. One day he approached me, holding a basketball, and asked if I wanted to play a quick game of one-on-one. I figured, why not? He seemed harmless, just a lonely guy looking for some company. His name was Tom, and he was surprisingly good, agile for his age. We played a few games, chatted about basketball, life, and the neighborhood. It was nice having someone to talk to. He never asked anything personal, never overstepped boundaries, until he did. One evening, after an intense game, Tom suggested we grab a drink at a nearby cafe. Hesitant but not wanting to be rude, I agreed. We sat in a corner booth, the cafe dimly lit and almost empty. He asked more about my life, where I worked, if I had family nearby. His questions were innocent enough, but something about the way he listened, his eyes a little too focused, put me on edge. I started noticing him more often, not just at the playground but around my apartment, at the grocery store, even at my workplace. It seemed like a coincidence at first, but the frequency of these chance encounters was unnerving. I tried to brush it off. Paranoia, I told myself. He was just a friendly guy. Then, one night, I was walking home from the playground, the streets deserted. Tom appeared out of nowhere, falling into step beside me. He made small talk, but his presence felt suffocating. I could feel my pulse quicken, every instinct screaming at me to get away. I made an excuse about needing to hurry home, but he didn't take the hint. He followed me, maintaining that eerie, friendly smile. "Tom, I need to get going," I said, my voice shaky. "Thanks for the game, but I'll see you around." He didn't respond immediately, just kept walking beside me, too close for comfort. Finally, he stopped, his smile fading. "You know, you're a hard person to get to know," he said softly, almost sadly. "I just want to be friends." I mumbled something about being busy and hurried away, my mind racing. From then on, I tried to avoid the playground, changing my routine, taking different routes home. But no matter what I did, Tom always seemed to find me. His demeanor grew more insistent, his eyes more intense. One rainy evening, I found him waiting outside my apartment building. My stomach twisted in fear. "Tom, this is getting weird," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You need to leave me alone." He stepped closer, rain dripping from his coat. "I thought we were friends," he said, a strange desperation in his voice. "I thought you understood." I turned and ran, my heart pounding, not daring to look back. I burst into my apartment, slamming the door behind me. For hours I sat in the dark, every creak of the building making me jump. I called the police, but without any concrete threat, there wasn't much they could do. Days passed, and Tom vanished. No more coincidental encounters, no more waiting outside my building. It was a relief, but a small part of me couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, watching. One night, weeks later, I woke to a noise in my apartment. My heart leaped into my throat as I crept through the dark, gripping a baseball bat. In the kitchen, I found a small note on the counter. "I'll always be your friend." I never saw Tom again, but the fear never left. Was he still watching, waiting for the right moment to reappear? Every shadow, every unexpected noise kept me on edge. I moved to a new city, changed my routine, but the paranoia remained. Sometimes, when I'm alone in the quiet of the night, I think I hear footsteps outside my window, a soft, persistent tapping that could be the wind or something else. I never look. I don't want to know. The headlights of my car cut through the oppressive darkness as I navigated the empty roads back home. It was late, far later than I'd planned to be out, and the eerie quiet of the countryside added an unsettling chill to the night. My GPS had rerouted me due to construction, sending me down a desolate, unfamiliar stretch of road. The asphalt shimmered under the moonlight, the only illumination besides my own beams. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, the screen flashing my wife's name. I picked it up, grateful for the distraction. "Hey, babe," I answered, trying to mask the unease in my voice. "You're still not home?" she asked, concern lacing her tone. "Yeah, took a wrong turn somewhere." Shouldn't be too much longer. We chatted briefly, her voice a comforting anchor in the darkness. After hanging up, the silence returned, thicker than before. I adjusted the rearview mirror and caught a glimpse of something strange, a dark figure standing on the side of the road. I blinked and it was gone. My mind, likely playing tricks on me. The road wound through dense woods, trees looming like silent sentinels. A fog began to roll in, thick and suffocating, reducing visibility to almost nothing. I slowed to a crawl, gripping the wheel with sweaty palms. The fog swirled around the car, turning the world into a murky void. Suddenly, my car sputtered, and the engine died. Panic surged through me as I tried to restart it, but it was no use. The silence was deafening. I stepped out, the cold air biting through my jacket. I popped the hood and peered into the engine, though I had no idea what I was looking for. A sound behind me made me freeze. It was faint, a distant wail that sent shivers down my spine. I turned slowly, scanning the fog for any sign of movement. There it was again, closer this time. A long, mournful cry, like a child lost in the woods. I tried my phone, but of course, there was no signal. Typical. I weighed my options, then decided to walk back the way I came, hoping to find help, or at least a spot with better reception. Each step felt like an eternity, the fog swallowing me whole. The wailing grew louder, almost unbearably close now. I could feel eyes on me, watching from the shadows. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound of footsteps echoed mine, matching my rhythm. But when I stopped, they continued for a beat before halting. I spun around, eyes straining to see through the fog. There, just out of reach, a silhouette stood. It was small, childlike, with dark, hollow eyes staring right at me. I stumbled back, the wailing now a piercing scream that filled the air. The figure moved closer, gliding silently across the ground. I turned and ran, branches and leaves whipping at my face. My breath came in ragged gasps, the fog making it hard to see or breathe. I didn't dare look back, the scream chasing me through the trees. My foot caught on something and I fell hard, the impact knocking the wind out of me. I lay there, stunned, as the wailing ceased. The silence was even worse. I struggled to my feet, my body aching, and limped forward. Through the haze, I saw a faint light. A house, perhaps, or a gas station. Desperation drove me toward it. As I approached, the light flickered, revealing an old, dilapidated building. The windows were broken, and the door hung loosely on its hinges. I hesitated but had no other choice. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The floor creaked under my weight, the air thick with the smell of decay. I fumbled for a light switch, but there was none. Instead, I found an old lantern and lit it, the weak flame casting eerie shadows on the walls. The wailing began again, louder than ever, coming from somewhere inside the house. I followed the sound, each step taking me deeper into the darkness. The walls were lined with old photographs, their faces scratched out, eyes gouged. In the corner of the room, I saw it, a crib, ancient and rotting. The wailing came from within. Trembling, I approached and looked inside. The crib was empty, but the wailing continued, echoing around me. I turned to leave, but the doorway was blocked. The childlike figure stood there, eyes black as night, mouth open in a silent scream. I stumbled back, my lantern flickering. The walls seemed to close in, the shadows growing longer, darker. I was trapped. The figure moved closer, its hollow eyes boring into mine. I backed into the corner, the wailing now inside my head, filling every crevice of my mind. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. And then, everything went black. I woke up to the sound of birds chirping, the sunlight filtering through the broken windows. The fog had lifted, and the house was empty. My car was gone, and so was the figure. I stumbled outside, dazed and confused, my mind struggling to process what had happened. I found my way back to the main road and flagged down a passing car. The driver took me to the nearest town, where I called my wife. She came to get me, her face pale with worry. I never told her what happened that night, and I never found out what that figure was. But every now and then, when the fog rolls in, I hear that wailing again, haunting my dreams, reminding me that some roads should never be traveled alone.